I spoke to one person in Egypt who described Hamas as lions, meaning that they are brave warriors. And what you're seeing is with every day of this bombardment in Gaza, people are being kind of pushed towards more extreme positions.
Ah, yes, Clarissa Ward. Yeah, the news media is not what it used to be. And even before, they probably weren't what they should be. Our news media, the most corrupt institution in the United States of America, as I have been pointing out for years. CNN reporter Clarissa Ward. Well, happy Wednesday once again. Hour number 3. And it is Mailbag Day. Because it's Wednesday, it's hump day. Hillary Clinton waking up in a pool of her own dried vomit and Mailbag Day. Those two things might seem unrelated. There's a little bit of connective tissue, however. That was a great call, Paul. And Paul, thank you for calling in. I would have happily spent more time, but I ran out the clock on myself. Paul, listening to our humble radio broadcast, 2 p.m. London time, listens to my humble show and to American radio to find out what's going on in the world, because the BBC and even Sky News, he said, not doing a good job of getting the truth out. That is a major issue. A major issue. And in fact, there was a story when Paul called in just moments before. I was reading a story out of Great Britain, because, you know, the internet and everything, the patriarchy created the internet, and Al Gore, of course, so that the whole world could be connected. Poster of Israeli twins kidnapped by Hamas, defaced with Hitler mustaches. This is in merry old England. Police have launched an investigation into the vandalism. A little 3-year-old girl's cute picture of them, and put posters up in England. Emma and Yuli Cuneo, 3 years old, Israeli babies kidnapped by the troglodytes. And the horror. You remember the Israeli father crying a week ago when he found out that his 3-year-old daughter had been killed because he had lost track of her. Found out she had been killed, and he was thrilled that she had only been killed and wasn't being held hostage by the savages in their 311-mile tunnel system. Amazing. So this, it's going on not just in the United States, where they're protesting in favor of jihad and martyrdom on the campus of George Washington University, but in South Hampstead as well, in England, the Hitler mustaches, because there is a global jihad. And the Democrat Party is recruiting white kids from the suburbs to endorse the jihad. All Democrats, 100% Democrats. Now, it's Mailbag Day because it's Wednesday. And I'd like to get to the mailbag. You can settle in for the mailbag segment. All right, let's go right to it, Jeff. T-Bone asks, Chris, back in autumn 1940, Great Britain was in a declared war with Germany, as Israel is with Hamas today. Germany indiscriminately bombed England, and in 1942-1943, the UK retaliated. What do you see as the difference in how FDR supported England compared to how Biden supports Israel? Well, not to bring race into it, but it's black and white. It's night and day. FDR, the progressive Democrat that rounded up all the Japanese Americans in the United States and threw them into internment camps because he was a left-wing president, and, in Hitler's party, the Socialist Workers' Party, and, of course, the communists in the Soviet Union at the time. The Democrat Party changes, and then again it doesn't. Now, it's true. and I believe his name was Bomber Harris, a British general named Harris, who was a huge advocate, and he successfully advocated under Winston Churchill for bombing the hell out of German cities. And, one of the lines was, blacken the skies with bombers. As we bombed the hell out of them, they were firing V-1 missiles and V-2 missiles, raining down on England, on London, going after civilian targets. The Socialist Workers' Party was of Adolf Hitler. And when the British, thanks to us, finally got to, sorry, Paul, but, true enough, the United States, had it not been for the United States entering the war, Hitler would have won in Europe, and that would have been that. But we did enter the war, and my father, a Navy fighter pilot, dropping bombs on Germans in France and beyond. God bless America. And, as to Europe and the world, you're welcome. Now shut up. Man, just kidding. You don't have to shut up. Thanks to us, you don't have to shut up. So T-Bone says, what's the difference between how FDR supported England and how Biden supports Israel? And I do think that there are stark differences, and part of it is that the Democrat Party is not a pro-scratch part of it. Let me start that sentence over again. The Democrat Party is no longer a pro-Israel party, and Joe Biden is a sock puppet for the Democrat Party, which has been taken over by the international left. The international left is anti-Israel, and they view the world through this ridiculous, fallacious prism of victim and victimizer. And since they view the so-called Palestinians not an actual ethnic group or race or anything of the kind, just Arabs, another tribe in the Arab world. But the left views the so-called Palestinians as victims. Victims of whom? Well, of the Jews, of Israel, of course. Because the Jews, after the Socialist Workers' Party in Germany in the 1930s and 1940s, sought to exterminate the entire Jewish population under the final solution. I was discussing this yesterday, decided on at the Wannsee Conference near Berlin. The left and we said the civilized world and the so-called United Nations got together and said the Jewish people need a homeland. They're no longer safe or comfortable in Europe, and so the historical homeland of the Jewish people is where they are now. Going back to Abraham again, how many? 4,500 years ago, Abraham. Moses, thousands of, you're supposed to be able to answer this off the top of your head. And Moses, fleeing slavery in Egypt under the pharaohs and going to the promised land and all of that stuff. Obviously they have a very obvious historical claim to Israel. FDR and then Harry Truman did support the creation of the state of Israel. There are a lot you could be critical of FDR about when it comes to not hitting the rail spurs, going to the death camps and things like that. But that's having anti-Semites in his cabinet during the 1930s and the 1940s, which FDR did. But he was on the side of crushing the Socialist Workers' Party of Adolf Hitler and that. Now, Joe Biden does not appear to be a great ally to Israel. He went to Israel, but it forced Israel to tap the brakes and stop going after Hamas as aggressively as they were. Now they're going after Hamas very methodically, very intelligently. One of the strongest leaders in the world, Benjamin Netanyahu, although the other night on my Newsmax show, the liberal on the show said that, there's a weakness problem, but it's not Joe Biden being a weak president. It's Benjamin Netanyahu being a weak leader. If I had been sipping water, I would have done a spit take because that's about the most ridiculous thing ever. The thing is, T-Bone, is that the Democrats think you can have a clean war, a pure war, where nobody really gets hurt. And the news media sanitizes everything. They're not showing the images of the murdered Israelis. They're not showing the horrors of what the troglodytes have inflicted. They're not showing the evil, and that is the right word, of radical Islam and what Hamas did in this instance. Now, the American media is an extension of the Democrat Party as well, an engorged appendage of the Democrat Party. But FDR was a very strong ally to Churchill and the British, and to a strong leader when it came to smashing fascism in Europe. By the way, Benito Mussolini was a socialist all his adult life till he hopped at the last minute, basically, over to the fascist party because they were going somewhere. And he said fascism was a merger of state and corporate power, which is what we see with the Democrat Party and the corporate media and corporate power, the information oligarchs in the United States. I would say that Joe Biden is not a great ally to Israel because the Democrat Party is not a great ally to Israel. Joe Biden is tripping up Israel in subtle ways. There has still been no major land incursion into the Gaza, and part of that is because of Joe Biden. He's a dishonest man and not a good leader. Thanks, T-Bone. Robert Fisher asks, "Hi, Chris. Love both shows, my radio show and my Newsmax show. Can you help me understand why Muslims hate the Jewish people so much? The information I have makes it very difficult to understand this level of hatred." Well, anti-Semitism is a bizarre reality that has been around for millennia now. And in the 20th century, we had the Socialist Workers' Party of Adolf Hitler and beyond. You know, the Italians were not as anti-Semitic. The Italian fascists were not as anti-Semitic as the German fascists. The Spanish fascists, not as anti-Semitic either. The French rounded up their Jews and gave their Jews to the Germans for extermination. But it is, look, it's one of the great mysteries of history, Robert. It honestly is. Now, the modern iteration of this is the poor Palestinians had their land stolen by the United Nations and the Jews after World War II to give them a homeland without any regard for the so-called Palestinian people. Reality is the Jews with, at that point, a lot of European characteristics came in and settled Israel, and they brought modernity, the 20th century at the time, to Israel. And it's true that there were Palestinians that were displaced. Now, the reality is the best place to live in that region is Israel. And the Arabs and Muslims are welcome to live there side by side with the Jews if they're willing to live in peace. And that's where the problem comes in. Now, you know, I mean, and again, and the Democrats in the United States, oh, that's an occupied colonial force, Israel. They're using these buzzwords that the hard left uses. It is one of the great mysteries of all of human history, Robert. It really is. You know, but it's about leadership. And they teach anti-Semitism in schools, genocidal anti-Semitism in schools in the Gaza and the West Bank and in Lebanon and in Egypt and now in the United States of America. It's what they teach here as well. Now, one of the questions is from David. How the hell did you get so lucky to sit next to Jen? That's talking about the Newsmax show, and Jen Pellegrino on Newsmax, and show host and journalist and anchor woman, Jen Pellegrino, who is wonderful, and she couldn't be a nicer person, and she's just great, and she's very lovely, which I think is probably what David is talking about in large part. How the hell did you get so lucky to sit next to Jen? You know, I'm just a lucky guy. You know, and good, clean living. Good, clean living is part of it. That's what I got to say to that, David. And good, clean living leads to all kinds of good things. I do have two more mailbag questions that I want to share with you, and I'll get to those in just a couple of minutes. Hey, are you feeling overwhelmed about the upcoming holidays? You know, it's hard to think about it with everything that's more expensive, and your credit cards may be pushed to the limit already. Now's the time to pay off that debt and get your finances under control before the holiday seasons fly up on us, which they are doing. If you're a homeowner, American Financing can help you access the equity in your home for instant savings. They're saving homeowners just like you an average of $700 a month, American money. Think about how that money could help your family, help you through the holiday season. And if you start today, you may be able to delay 2 mortgage payments, giving you extra holiday cash. It's going to cost you absolutely nothing to find out how much you can save. The holidays are going to be here before you know it. So call their salary-based mortgage consultants today, not running on commission, American Financing. Call American Financing at 888-402-0299. That's 888-402-0299. Or find them on Al Gore's amazing internet at americanfinancing.net. NMLS 182334 and MLSconsumeraccess.org. Hey, it's Lola. That's one of the Democrat Party's theme songs, too. Yeah, I got 2 more mailbag questions coming up, and more crazy Democrat news. Why do they give me so much crazy every day? Hey, it's Chris Plant, excited to tell you about our July 2024 Listener Sea Cruise. We'll be sailing around the British Isles, visiting Scotland and Ireland. Please join us. Book by this July 31st for extra savings. Visit ChrisPlantCruise.com. Okay, back to the mailbag. 2 more questions. Rick asks, why will Republicans pick a Speaker of the House that Democrats approve of, but not one the base would approve of? Short answer, rhinos. Short answer is rhinos. And fear. You know, these jobs must be the best jobs in the world because people will sell their souls for 1 more 2-year term in the House of Representatives. I don't understand the appeal myself, but, a lot of rhinos, a lot of squishy, don't want to stand up and have the fight over conservative values. Maybe what's going on today will help move the ball towards civilization. I'm hopeful. I am hopeful. And Kurt Wright asks, thank you for covering the Beirut bombing anniversary. That was day before yesterday, 40 years. Can you share implications from that event into current events? It was Hezbollah. That was the world's introduction to Hezbollah. 40 years ago, day before yesterday, 241 Americans, mostly Marines, blown up by a truck bomb. All kinds of mistakes were made by the United States Marine Corps. The Marines at the barracks were not allowed to have ammunition in their weapons, for example. But we really hadn't been introduced to the suicide attacks of radical Islam in 1983. Now we're much more familiar. And Hamas is still there. They're firing at and killing Israelis today in Israel. The implications are that was the beginning of something big. Today is also the 40th anniversary of the Grenada invasion 40 years ago today. Good mailbag questions, fun mailbag questions. I always like to spend more time on the mailbag than I reasonably should. Yeah, 40 years ago, day before yesterday, the Marine Corps barracks bombing. And that was, nobody knew Hezbollah until that day 40 years ago. And then on this day 40 years ago, President Ronald Reagan, and the invasion of Grenada, because the communists were taking over. The Soviet Bolshevik communists had used their Cuban communist proxy troops to go into Grenada and kill the leader. They stood him up against a wall at an old Spanish fort there and shot and killed him, and they took over. And I actually spent a month in Grenada one time at a beach hotel at the top of Grand Anse Beach, and had a great time in Grenada for a month. When was that? 2005. 2000, I think it's 2005. And had a great time, lovely time there. I have scrubs from the medical school there, just the shirt, the ties. It's part of my pajama collection when I'm at home. And it's got because the medical school, remember the Marines had to go in and evacuate the students, many American students at the medical school there. And the commies had come in, the Cuban troops, and they built like a 12,000-foot runway in Grenada, which is much longer than you need for any commercial air traffic, because it was about long-range Soviet bombers moving in and out of Grenada in the Caribbean, within striking range of the United States of America, and that was the whole point. Ronald Reagan recognized that the Soviet communists, Putin was a Soviet communist then, he's a Russian communist now. But Ronald Reagan recognized this was the Soviets making a move on the Western world, the Western Hemisphere, see the Truman Doctrine, and said, we're not going to have any of that. The Soviets moving in through their proxies, the Cubans, commie. And Ronald Reagan said, we're not going to allow that to happen. So we sent troops in, and the news media, I remember very well at the time, were screaming, oh, this is a distraction to distract attention from the Marine Corps barracks bombing 2 days earlier, which was a giant story, and they were trying to blame Ronald Reagan for it. And the then Marine Corps Commandant, P.X. Kelly, became the villain of the story. I used to know P.X. Kelly's daughter. She worked on Capitol Hill as a staffer. But never mind that. Enough about me. The commies had to be driven out of Grenada. And Ronald Reagan and the U.S. military drove the commies out of Grenada. And it's been more or less peaceful ever since in Grenada. Grenada's nice. And the Grenadines, there's the main island, and then there are other smaller islands associated with Grenada, a country. The commies went in and they killed the leader, shot him and killed him, because that's what commies do, because the left kills everyone and steals what's left. There is a story in the Fayetteville Observer today. 82nd Airborne Division veterans remember Grenada invasion 40 years later. They start with a story of 20-year-old Ed Harm, landed the Caribbean nation of Grenada in October of 1983. First noticed the heat. Yeah, and, honestly, the commies had moved in there. Says the doors to the military aircraft that he was aboard opened, and Harm saw and heard tracer fire and explosions. We exited the aircraft. We went into a drainage ditch and took cover. And the first thing I can remember is one of the first sergeants, who was a Vietnam veteran, 1983, said, "Man, this looks like Vietnam." Harm is now a retired staff sergeant and said during the 40th anniversary event, Operation Urgent Fury, held in Fayetteville, lots of Army and military down there. Harm and his fellow paratroopers out of Fort Bragg were sent to Grenada as reinforcements in response to the aftermath of a coup overthrowing the Marxist Prime Minister Maurice Bishop. President Ronald Reagan called upon U.S. forces to rescue 600 American students and 400 foreign students living in Grenada and to protect American interests. About 8,000 soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines worked with 353 Caribbean allies to restore the country's government. Democracies where you don't shoot and kill, at the centuries-old Spanish fort where they dragged them, and locals will still bring you to the spot where their president was murdered by the communists in a firing squad, an execution, because that's what commies do. We don't teach this to people in college these days. We teach them to be pro-jihad, pro-genocide, anti-Semite, anti-capitalist, anti-American. It's the Democrat Party. Womp, womp, womp. Your Democrat Party. They're not on our side. Yeah, and it was a It was something. It really was. And it took the world by surprise, and the United States and the media tried to blame Ronald Reagan, saying he just did this to distract attention from the Beirut Marine Corps barracks bombing. No, all the ships were already on station in the Caribbean. It had been planned well in advance, long before the Marine Corps barracks bombing 2 days prior. And they decided to green light to go with it, even though they knew the media would attack them for it, which they did. And the now retired staff sergeant, he says, we secured enormous amounts of Soviet munitions, ammunition, vehicles, weapons, binoculars, and 6 pigs. Were those like Russian prostitutes? Is that what you're talking about there? There it is. Yeah, the commies were moving on the world. And you know what? They're not done. They're back. They're still at it. Now, Putin meeting with Xi Jinping last week in China. They are colluding. They are plotting. The Chinese are planning on taking over the planet Earth in the 21st century. They're commies. They're diabolical. And they're patient. All right, let's go to some audio, Jeff. Let's go to Cobble Kirby. Cobble Kirby, as he is known far and wide, former U.S. Navy Admiral. John Kirby, now a shill for the failed Biden presidency, still making stuff up. Yesterday, Cobble Kirby was asked at the White House briefing room about Joe Biden's job performance. You know, we got war in Europe, Russia, nuclear power invading Ukraine. We've got war in the Middle East, Hamas and Iran behind the curtain attacking. And by the way, we've got an awful lot of bad stuff going on. We now have 33 Americans killed by the jihadis in Israel, 24 now wounded in the region because Iranian proxies are firing missiles, rockets, munitions at Americans, where we still have a small number of Americans in Iraq at the Al-Assad Air Base and the Al-Harir Air Base in the north. We have people at our embassy in Baghdad. We also have a small number of American forces at the Al-Tanf garrison inside of Syria, near the border with Iraq. And we have had missiles raining down on our people there because of Iran, which is a terrorist state. So now we've had 33 Americans confirmed killed in this, in Israel, because of the troglodyte attack by Hamas. 24 Americans wounded. 1 American died as a result of a heart attack while being shelled. He's a contractor, not U.S. military force, but 24 U.S. military forces injured in these Iranian proxy attacks, which means they're Iranian attacks. 33 Americans killed in Israel because of another Iranian proxy, Hamas, and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. And we still have 10 Americans missing, unaccounted for, presumed to be either hostages or killed. All right? In the meantime, Israel continues to pound the Gaza Strip. They say they've killed 21 senior Hamas leaders and killed another one last night, well-known Hamas leader. And Joe Biden, he's hosting the Australian Prime Minister at the White House at a state dinner tonight where they had scheduled the band, the B-52s, to play. The B-52s, Love Shack. But White House scraps plan for B-52s to entertain at state dinner against backdrop of Israel-Hamas war, the Associated Press reports. The Associated Press, they have a direction from on high. They're not to refer to Hamas as a terrorist group. I guess they can call them a humanitarian group, but not a terrorist group. So the White House scrapped plans to have the New Wave Band, the B-52s, perform at Wednesday's state dinner for Australia's Prime Minister after deciding it would be inappropriate at a time when so many are facing sorrow and pain, in the words of First Lady Jill Biden. Without directly referencing the devastation in the Israel-Hamas war, First Lady announced Tuesday, "We've made a few adjustments to the entertainment portion of the dinner. Instead of the band best known for Love Shack and other hits, the entertainment will be instrumental." Yeah, maybe a cello, maybe Yo-Yo Ma in there or something like that, something different. Yeah, but we've got 33 Americans killed, 24 wounded, 10 presumed hostages or dead because the Democrats. Also, the Hamas, they have a navy because they gave them this waterfront property, and so they figured out ways to kill people using water because that's what they do. But a major naval commander was killed by the Israelis yesterday, and two members of their Frogman unit. They have scuba diver terrorists there, and two of the scuba diving terrorists were leaving the Gaza Strip and sneaking their way into Israel. But fortunately, the Israelis killed them. And I hope sharks ate their dead bodies immediately thereafter. Also, in the West Bank, a drone killed 3 Hamas killers because that's what you need to do with them. But Hezbollah in the north, who we first found out about 40 years ago, day before yesterday with the Marine Corps Barents bombing, are firing into Israel. And they have reportedly hundreds of thousands of missiles provided by Iran in Lebanon to fire at Israel. But today in America, more than 100 colleges are having pro-Hamas marches because of Students for Justice in Palestine. They don't know what any of those words mean. Students, justice, Palestine, all those words stump them. U.S. forces under attack 14 times just in the last week. Again, with 24 Americans injured, one contractor died of a heart attack in the midst of the bombardment. And what is Joe Biden doing? He's having the B-52s at the White House, not anymore, for the Australian Prime Minister's visit. Now let's go back to Cobble Kirby here. Cobble Kirby, one of the shills for the Democrat Party, a disgraced former admiral. How do you think Joe Biden's doing? What kind of a job is he doing as president with all this war and mayhem in the world?
Can you just give us a sense from the president's perspective, how is he balancing these two sort of immediate foreign policy objectives versus sort of his longer term foreign policy objectives that the prime minister's visit sort of embodies?
Well, he's balancing it well.
He's
doing it. I mean, if you want to give him a report card, A+. I mean, he's commander in chief. That never stops, and the duties and responsibilities are literally global. I mean, we are one nation that has truly global responsibilities.
You think?
And he's managing it all.
Yeah, A+. What with the war in Europe, war in the Middle East, China on the march, crashing into Philippine ships, 33 Americans killed by Hamas, 24 wounded by Iran and Iran proxies, 10 Americans being held hostage by the troglodytes and their 311-mile tunnel system, and the constantly embarrassing Cobble Kirby gives him an A+. An A+. He continues to embarrass himself for a paycheck. That, for some reason, reminded me of the transgender HIV-positive street prostitutes. Why? Why, Jeff, did that soundbite remind me of the transgender HIV-positive street prostitutes that the ACLU is fighting for in Tennessee? Why? Oh, wait, I just realized why.
There's only one Chris Plante. The Chris Plante Show.
Mr. A+ was going to have the B-52s performing at the White House tonight. They thought twice about that, decided against having the B-52s. A little rock lobster for you today, and And, maybe they should have students come in from universities instead. Let's go to soundbite number 19, and they could have the Democrat Utes come in and chant from the river to the sea at the state dinner.
Israel, Israel, you will learn! Israel, Israel, you will learn! For the millions will return! By the millions will return! From the river to the sea! Palestine will be free! Palestine will be free!
Yeah, they could have those guys come in and sing to the Australian Prime Minister. Let's go to soundbite number 2. CNN has a person named Aaron Burnett. And yesterday they were very excited to talk about how nice it is in the tunnels, in the Hamas tunnels for the hostages, where they have everything you could need.
Some things stand out in the mundane necessity, right? You're talking about tunnels. We know these tunnels have ventilation. We know that they've been known to have air conditioning. This has all been reporting that we've heard from the Israelis over the years. But the fact that she's saying she was held underground for more than 2 weeks, that there was shampoo, there was antibiotics, there was a guard per hostage in the experience she had, that there were medics and paramedics, and obviously she is elderly. The other woman who was released also elderly and had medical needs, and that they had the medicine needed, and if not, something similar to replace it.
And that's not all. I mean, they not only have medics and paramedics, and they had ventilation and AC and maybe ashtrays.
It is pretty stunning because you've got to contrast that with what's happening above the ground, right? Where
Jews.
There isn't water, never mind shampoo, okay? They don't have water. They're using toilet water. There is no morphine.
That
for
is
any
water.
Kind of amputations, antibiotics.
Amputations.
No, right? But Hamas had stockpiled all of that and has all of that underground, and that's what we're learning from her.
That's what we're learning. But wait, because, if you're a lady hostage, they've got you in mind.
When they say prepared for women's needs, okay? They were therefore prepared. I mean, let's just go ahead. I think we're being honest about it. That means they had tampons and things, okay? That is a level of preparation for what they were going to do, right? And it shows that they were going to take people of all different ages, right? It shows a preparation for that.
See? She's giving them credit for preparing because they had a level of preparation. That means they had tampons. Sounds like she's just assuming that. But the level of preparation, maybe they had preparation H in case they had any hostages with hemorrhoids, because they're such charitable people, the hostage takers, the terrorists, the murderers, are so thoughtful, and their planning was so thorough because they had been plotting it for months and maybe a year. The murder, they're not very good at getting stuff done, It's culturally, they're not a model going forward. But at CNN, they're getting a lot of love. Ventilation, ashtrays, preparation H, maybe, tampons, CNN loves the jihad. It's those Jews that are the problem, just like on campus.